One of the reasons I picked Philadelphia Seminary was because the reputation of the faculty and the quality of education. Um, Not being a scholar particularly, however, and having to work 3 jobs to be able to afford seminary, I knew it was going to be an incredible challenge to obtain the information and training that I wanted, and of course satisfy the demands, expectations of the seminary. Some of the professors, in my opinion, were a little aloof and intellectual, and were very busy writing their papers and preparing symposia all over the country. But there were some that very clearly cared for the students and would ask about the challenges that we faced. The Heinekens were a great couple, inviting us over to their home, having conversations after class, making time before they played tennis and whooped everybody's butt. But Bob Warneman, for me, was probably the best mentor, as well as educator. While I had a background in German and felt I had a little facility for a language, certainly Hebrew did not come easily. But Bob's teaching method helped us to understand the culture and the nuances, and made reading and translating Hebrew fun and frankly exciting. It was something of an adventure tour. But Bob also adopted Burbas as the annex and would often hold class there. And so if people were looking for us around campus, they were simply told we were at the seminary annex. We had some rather... So Burbas was a bar and restaurant out somewhere off of Mount Pleasant, as I recall. But Bob would have the Bible study out there and hold Hebrew class, but also just gather us to see how we were doing. On one occasion, I had just gotten selective service notice that I was being called up and told to report the next day for induction into the Army and service in Vietnam as an enlisted man. And again, because a couple of my friends had been killed over there, it was difficult for me to see myself as any better than anyone. Didn't quite like the selective service process where some were allowed to go to college and elsewhere and not serve. So I told him about it and indicated that I was torn and felt like maybe I needed to follow that and go the next day. And he very calmly told me that it was clear to him that I had come to seminary with a purpose, with a call, and that I could actually better serve the church, the troops, my God, if I stayed at seminary and completed it and went on with ordination and chaplaincy. That was at a time when most of the professors were anti-war and made it very clear to me that I was on the wrong path and I needed to come to my senses and consider going into the ministry, to the point where they were going to have a peace symposium at the seminary and wanted me to be the sole representative of, if you will, the opposite side. I declined and went home for the weekend. But as part of that, Bill, help me with the name, Bill Lazarus was the dean and the ethics professor. And our senior paper, project, and presentation was supposed to be about our particular field and helping people in the class understand the details of that and of our call. So, of course, I did one on the chaplaincy. And frankly, he gave me a hard time in class and in the preparation and throughout the years. But it became clear to me as I was doing the presentation that he had pushed me so that it was clear to me why I was going through all of that, and to make sure I was prepared for all of the criticism and the challenges of military chaplaincy during Vietnam. So it wasn't pleasant, but it was probably one of the more helpful exercises and demonstrations of leadership and coaching and being the dean. As a member of the choir, certainly had some good experiences. Bob ran a quality choir and taught us quite a lot. It would help later in chanting in some churches and appreciating the music, but also simply a good experience of working with others and going to Lincoln Center and on the New England tour, working with Eddie Bonnemere and a few others. Because Bob was so intent on his performances being exactly right and would get a little nervous, we decided it would be most helpful if we would put something in his music so that he might find as he turned the leaf of Playboy Centerfold, or something written in Pig Latin, or even a little statue that might be considered off color. So Bob never quite knew what was going to happen at a concert, and very carefully opened his binder. And on occasion, we wouldn't put anything in there, and then he was on pins and needles the rest of the concert, waiting to turn the last page. But we had that kind of relationship that was, I think, rather healthy in a stressful environment. He also invited us down to the Academy of Music to be, I think the term was supers in the operas. So basically extras. And we had some rather interesting opportunities. I remember meeting Marie Callas at one point. And we would then often go across the street. I don't know what restaurant it was, but it was our restaurant afterwards. And I was, with all of Mark's questions, I was reminded of a time when we got back rather late. And Rolf and I got up to our room. It must have been after midnight. So dark and cold. And as we opened the door, there wasn't a thing in our room. Not a rug, not a hanger, not a light bulb, nothing. So we just kind of laid down and slept on the floor that night. but could hear our neighbors giggling and guffawing across the hall. And our furniture eventually came in, but we were advised that might not be the one and only time. So in the wooden structure there of the porch were a lot of carpenter bees. And John would go around and spray, and there would just be quite a number of bodies lying all over. And I discovered that one of the offenders was afraid of bees. And so I gathered up a bunch of them. I put some over the door. I put some under his pillow, some in his underwear drawer, throughout his room. And so as we went to bed the next night and he came in, I believe after playing a late basketball game, heard one scream and then another and several more. He wasn't quite catatonic, but I can assure you we never had a problem with things disappearing out of our room again.